Good evening, everyone, and happy holidays. It is 7 p.m. in NYC and 4 p.m. in Acampo, California, in the Lodi wine region. I'm Sam Kimball from Crush Wine Experiences, formerly New York Wine Events. And thank you so much for joining us on virtual day trip to wine country, presented by Citi. We are here for fourth generation grape growers, connecting people to the land through wine. I love it. We're going to Acampo, California, in the world famous San Joaquin Valley of California. Our theme is a wine family that built its business on generations of grape growing. It's truly an old world story. It's about the land, the people, and the wine, as you will see. And there's perhaps no more authentic wine story than one where the wines are sourced from one source, not multiple vineyards or suppliers. And LangeTwins is our winery and our guest, and we're really excited. LangeTwins is 4 generations. They have 4 single vineyards across 2 appellations, Clarksburg appellation and the Lodi appellation. And the background is very cool. We'll hear more about it, but the short version is that Brad and Randall Lange, twins, and 4th generation Lodi wine grape growers, grew up and raised their families on the land, which they still farm to this day. And together with the 5th generation, they made the generational decision to build a winery to ensure that their farm, their communities, and their agricultural way of life thrives. And that's near and dear to my heart. We're all about discovery and wine education, but we're also about sustainability. And what is more about sustainability than that decision that the Lange family made to build a winery and keep their communities and their agricultural way of life going. So the LangeTwins Winery, a fascinating place, absolutely delicious wines, 4 generations, 2 appellations in California there, and 30 unique grape varietals. It's a wonderful story. I discovered this winery when I was at the Zinfandel experience in 2016, and I ran into Randall Lange at one of the tables. There were 120 wine tasting tables, 120 amazing California wineries, and I didn't know anything about Lodi, and I was blown away by what I tasted, and I ended up getting to a long conversation, which has been going on now for 5+ years with the Lange family. So it's truly an honor to be with you guys tonight. I want to welcome everybody. Welcome one, welcome all. Please ask any questions or make comments in the chat of Zoom, and we will answer those as we go on the fly during the session. And also, I see people already doing this. If you would hit the chat right now and tell us where in the world you are tuning in from. We love seeing that, and it's wonderful to be visiting with everyone during the holidays and tasting some great wine. So this evening, we're going to travel virtually to Acampo, California. And I want to say hi to a few people. I see, wow, Lakewood, Washington. I love it. Sonoma County, Pacifica, California, North Carolina, Santa Clarita. Wow, we got a really good West Coast contingent tonight, as well as some East Coasters. It's great to see everybody. Welcome, you guys. So Acampo, California is a very small town just north of Lodi, in the San Joaquin County in California. In the 1870s, Acampo was named as a Southern Pacific Railroad station. And in 2010, Acampo's population was 341. I'm not sure what it was in the 2020 census, but in the 2010 census, it was 341 people. And it's really an amazing story. You're gonna hear about the family. Wow, we got Florida in the house, Long Island, West Orange, New Jersey. Love it. Welcome, everybody. Hey, Nancy. All right, so LangeTwins is all about 4th generation grape growers, connecting people to the land through wine. I want to actually just show really quickly, because it's always fun to do this. I want to show you guys where we're headed on the map. If you're not familiar, this in my background, you can see San Francisco right over my shoulder. And there you see, south of Lodi, or just north of Lodi, and basically due east of San Francisco, a little bit north, is the little town of Acampo. and a wonderful place. And the winery, by the way, has an incredible hospitality operation, a beautiful tasting room. If you're ever out in that neck of the woods, you got to visit. All right, so we are going to get started with our guests. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our guests. We have with us, and we're really honored, Marissa Lange, member of the family and the president at LangeTwins Winery, and David Akiyoshi, the head winemaker at LangeTwins, who, if some of you were watching us about a year and a half ago, we did a session just like this with David. Yes. So it is great to see you guys. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. We're happy to be here.
Absolutely thrilled. So, and I know my parents, as you mentioned before, Randy and Shar, have had the pleasure of playing host to this fine group of folks. So I am really grateful to be able to be here with you tonight with David, with our wines. It sounds like we've got folks from all over the US. And so for the next 45 minutes or so, welcome to LangeTwins.
We love it, Marissa. Thank you. By the way, we have somebody watching. We have Paul. Welcome, Paul, from Cheshire, England.
Nice.
Outstanding. Well, what time is it in England right now?
Paul, I believe, tell us in the chat if we're correct. I think it's about 1 a.m. And change in England right now. So
outstanding. And a shout out to Susan, who's a wine club member in Chicago that I saw on there. So wonderful. Thank you so much. We look forward to giving you a preview of what's coming your way.
We love Susan. Susan is a regular visitor with us on these broadcasts, and she's bringing the heat from Chicago. So we love that. All right. So now I have to ask you guys, where does this broadcast find each of you? You're obviously together. Where are you at right now?
We are broadcasting live from Acampo. So I don't know quite the SNL vibe, but we, as you mentioned, are in the heart of the Lodi appellation, but in a small township called Acampo, which is where I was born and raised, and is where we have called home. Both Acampo for my generation and Lodi for the past 5 generations. My family came to this area in the late 1800s.
Wow, that's amazing.
To say we are rooted here is definitely an understatement.
So you grew up in Acampo, which is a town of 200 or 300 people, and your whole family is from there and has been there since the 1800s.
Yeah.
Tell us about growing up in Acampo, California.
It is a vibrant town. So when I was growing up, the population of Acampo was 200, which meant my family contained, or rather we were 5% of the total population of Acampo. So in that regards, we had some influence. Yes, Acampo has a post office, it has a general store, but more importantly, what it has is an extraordinary collection of vineyards in this area. And an extraordinary collection of farmers that have just that similar generational outlook that are able to really nurture and evolve with this industry over the course of the last several decades. So growing up, I was a farm kid. I have 2 brothers and 2 cousins, so there was the 5 of us. We moved like a pack. There was a cafe 2 miles down the road, and our parents told us that we would be, if we could get there without setting foot on the county road, we could ride our ATVs there and order ourselves a Coke.
I love that.
We absolutely could. So we vineyard hopped from vineyard to vineyard on our ATVs, showed up very proudly at the cafe, all 5 of us, ordered our Cokes, and then proceeded to do that every day throughout the summer. And when the cafe presented my parents with the bill, was when we had some restrictions the following summer.
That's so
funny. It's a country lifestyle. It was fantastic.
I love that. I have to ask you, I don't want to, you'll stop me, Marissa. We won't go down too far a rabbit hole here, but I'm fascinated, as an East Coaster, I'm fascinated by the San Joaquin Valley. I mean, this is the most, arguably the most abundant agricultural area in the world. Not only the United States. I mean, California is like the world's 7th largest economy or something, right? And the San Joaquin Valley is just a massive producer of agriculture and produce and everything under the sun. Tell us a little bit about, I mean, your family's been there since the 1800s.
Mm.
You go back to the beginning of when this incredibly fertile and interesting place started to be cultivated.
We do, and I'll tag team this with David, as I know he has a tremendous history in this valley as well. But when our family arrived over from East Germany in the late 1800s, it was agriculture and the tradition of agriculture that they brought with them. And at that time, they were farming non-irrigated watermelons because the water table was at about 5 feet. So it was very much the land of plant a seed and let it grow. And so that has changed a little over time, but the fertility of the land has remained. And the diversity of what we have grown here has certainly grown over the course of the last 5 generations.
Sure, without a doubt. And one of the things, if you look at California and the greater San Joaquin Valley, Central Valley itself, it is basically an alluvial plain that was fed by the rivers, erosion from the mountains out into the Pacific Ocean. And so the soils are deep, they're fertile. We had an abundance of water, and from that, they really created some great industry here. And importantly, we also had the climate to support a lot of that. And so we didn't have a lot of these issues with maladies or things like that. We had the water resources, we had the soil, and we had the climate, these things that really allowed California to be a superior area for growing all sorts of agricultural crops here. So a wide diversity really of produce can be grown in.
Here in Lodi proper, as we speak to the climate, if you looked back or took note of that map that you were looking at, if you were looking at California going west to east, you see that you're going right through the San Francisco Bay in a latitudinal way straight to Lodi. And so that marine influence carried into our area. And so what differentiates our part of the northern interior versus other areas is that soil type and the climatic influence of the Pacific Ocean, even as inland as we are. That really provides that variation in temperatures and in humidities for our agricultural products to thrive and develop the sugars and the acids in balance.
So even though you're almost like 75 or 100 miles from the ocean, you still have a maritime effect on the valley.
Without a doubt, and it's rather significant too. And one of the real indicators of that would be the windmills. They're putting up 1 megawatt windmills to capture electric energy through that strong marine influence that comes across.
Yeah,
strong enough and constant breeze that allows those to produce enough electricity to make it worthwhile to plant those in the ground and really source the next kind of renewable resource of wind power. And so it's that consistent and that strong. And probably one of the other things that I like to talk about the Lodi appellation is where we were back in the day, where probably the #1 grape grown in this area was a table grape called Flame Tokais. And what was interesting about the Flame Tokay is it was really sold as how it looked, the characteristics, the colors. It looked like a flame, like a sunset, with these beautiful oranges and pinks in Flame Tokays from the Lodi region. But I will tell you, outside of the Lodi appellation, where we drew some very specific lines to demarcate the appellation. When we presented that for approval of an AVA, that outside of that map, the color wouldn't show up in the Flame Tokays. You actually wouldn't get premium pricing for it. And it was a very small kind of unique area. And grow it inside there all day long, you could grow Flame Tokays. And outside, didn't work. And it was just like Marissa was talking about. It was that diurnal shift, the warmth of the day and the cool of the night.
Yeah.
Created that pigment, that color. And that's another reason why I think this area is so unique and allows us to grow so many different grape varieties and do it well here.
Yeah, and I don't know if anybody, hit us in the chat if anybody watched, David, when you and I did a virtual tasting on Zoom a year and a half ago, but we talked about those grapes. We talked about that original table grape from the area. And to me, it was eye-opening. I had never heard of them before. But the other thing, what I learned today, learn something new every day, is the maritime climate really is very present there. We've got some sharp people watching. Mark just mentioned in the chat, Lodi, and this is his opinion, not necessarily mine, but I think he's right. Lodi is the only high-end AVA in the valley, as far as he knows. Do you concur? I mean, would that be an accurate assessment?
I'm a bit biased in that one. I would say
I'm 5 generations biased, so couldn't agree with you more. But
okay,
there is one smaller appellation a little farther south. I'm not as familiar with it.
Yep. What's it called, David?
It's the river bench or river.
oh, I don't know it.
It's yeah. We can talk about that later.
We will go dig in on that side, but
Okay.
it's in the valley. That climactic diurnal differentiation between nighttime temperatures, daytime temperatures change. So that's further south of us doesn't get that same advantage, and that had an impact on the Tokay's. Sure. It also has an impact on the varietal grapes that thrive here, to be sure. So we don't grow Thompson seedless grapes in this neck of the woods, and that really thrives further down south. And I do absolutely concur that we grow some stunningly high quality premium wines in this area, and with a diversity that not all appellations can really claim.
True, and probably one of the things I like, especially about the Lodi region, is that again, we can produce unique, varietally distinct wines here, mostly because of the soils and the climate, and also in doing a little bit of research on that, and I know I talked about it at the last meeting that we had. I look at the Sunset Western Gardening book, and they say all these things that we've talked about, but they do it mostly because they really worry that if you're going to plant rose bushes or begonias in your yard, they want to make sure that they're going to thrive. And so they recognize that you do that in the desert, it's not going to work out so well. And so these climactic regions that the Sunset magazine has put forth, we're at zone 14. It's an inland area with a marine influence. And what I like about it is this has nothing to do with grapes, and yet it does. Because if you look at the other zone 14s within the state of California, the areas that are also mentioned are Napa Valley, Sonoma, part of Livermore, and the Paso Robles region in California. So, so Lodi, I think, is in good stead as far as how our climate works with the grapes.
And I like to remind people, because we take people on vineyard tours here in New York State to the Hudson Valley and the North Fork of Long Island, but we also do trips to Europe. And I remind people that, grapes are kind of like us. I mean, when it's a hot day and when you get that diurnal shift, a hot day and then a cool night, the grapes, they need to recover. They need to cool off and recover and then get back out there the next day.
Yep, it's a good analogy on that side.
All right, so we got a lightning round here. This is a very sharp and active group in terms of comments and questions. By the way, shout out to Nancy, who was on the call with us, David, last year, 18 months ago.
Wow.
So Nancy, thank you for that. And Jan has a question. Was the previous program with David recorded, and can we watch it online? Yes, you can. Go to crushwinexp.com and go to the video hub. I'll put the link in the chat. Mark has a question. What sub-AVA are you in Lodi?
Yep. So there are 7 nested AVAs within the Lodi appellation, and we are in the Jayhant appellation. So the winery itself is in the Jayhant appellation, as is our homestead, what we call the River Ranch, where the twins built their homes and where we, in my generation, grew up. Yeah. Many of our family's estate vineyards are in the Jayhant appellation, but we also farm in 4 other appellations within the 7 nested appellations of the Lodi AVA. Right. So it's within Lodi, we are farming within 5 out of the 7. And then we also farm in the adjacent appellation of Clarksburg, which is the AVA that really spans across the interlocking waterways and islands of the Delta. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, cool. And we have a couple other questions. Paul from England asks, do you have your own microclimate where you are?
Interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
We have researched through that. What we find is really the predominant influence on our climate is still going to be the Delta breeze. And what we did in order to kind of map that out is we looked at we did these temperature hubs and watched the cool air as it washed across the Clarksburg area into Lodi. And so what happens is as you move from the western side of the Appalachian over to the eastern slopes, where it start to get into some really different soil types, much leaner soils, much rockier, they're more minerally, not so much tilth to it. And so you have a difference there as far as the soil types, but then you also have that air, the climate. It is, again, that marine air as it washes through is much more predominant on the western side, and then it diminishes as you get across to the eastern slope. But then you have different soils too. So you have different climates and you have different soil types. Each of those require, honestly, different farming. And this is where the Lange twins really excel. I've worked with the twins since the 1980s, and they were always interested in what can we do better? Based on what we did this vintage, what can we do to improve? What can we do to produce better quality every vintage? And so we really learned within Shenan appellation as well as up to Borden Ranch that it requires a different eye and a different strategy as how you grow Cabernets in those regions. And that's why even within 2 different Cabernets, for example, that we produced for our tasting room, they're close to each other. One is a little bit older. In fact, one of the original plots that the Mondavis, Robert Mondavi had really encouraged the Lange twins, who were back in the day, they were rather green as it were, but encouraged by Robert Mondavi to plant Cabernet, and they created a joint venture. And that was the 38 vineyard. So we planted that one. That was one of the original Cabernets in Lodi. But then just further, just a little bit east of that, we have another vineyard, and they're uniquely different. And so they were so different.
A mile apart, but uniquely different.
And so consequently, we produced 2 very different Cabernets, all from really the same appellation. So what I like is, again, just that ability to really work with the different vineyards to create its own personality,
its own expression.
And so that's what the vineyards here, especially, they're like individuals. Some are very sensitive, and some of them are rather robust and resilient. And so importantly is recognizing that personality type and how do you get the most out of that to produce the best quality every vintage. And the difficult part of that, and what I really respect the Lange twins and what they did in their early years of growing wine grapes, is that they recognized that. And they were very astute as far as how to apply that knowledge for the current and future vintages.
So you could say we really approach microclimates on a vineyard by vineyard basis. But that's more how we approach the management of our vineyards. I think from a meteorological perspective, we do divvy it up into delta, kind of the Lodi Valley, and then up in the lower hills, and there are some commonalities within those 3 regions. So we would break it up broadly in a 3 microclimate, but more specifically, exactly as David said, on a vineyard by vineyard basis, which is what gave inspiration to our single vineyard series, because there is nothing more authentic or pure than the expression of the fruit from a singular source.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys, it's like getting an education in the whole process, but you're reminding me of walking up to Randy's tasting table and just enjoying and tasting these amazing wines that you guys make and that David is the captain of. And anybody watching, if you've not had these wines from Lange Twins, you need to check them out. There's a couple of other questions. Chai has a question, super interesting. Can you elaborate a little bit about the soils? It seems that the alluvial plain is very fertile for grapes. Tell us a little bit about that. I, for one, don't know what alluvial. When you say alluvial, what are you referring to specifically?
Okay, alluvial is really as the rivers form and run across the different mountain tops and then and erode very slowly. You know, this is over the eons, of course.
Yep.
The alluvial soils create deposits. And funny thing is, if you really look at the Central Valley, it actually looks very similar to the San Francisco Bay, which is smaller.
Yep.
But it has the same kind of look to it in that you have a bay, the Bay Area, and slowly it's going to be filling in from erosion from, again, the mountains down into San Francisco Bay. But if you look at the greater Central Valley, it looks exactly the same. You know, you have that one outlet where there's the confluence, all these rivers from the north down and from the south across, and they meet in the Delta region and out into the Pacific Ocean. That, you know, again, it's something that occurs in geologic time, not necessarily our lifetimes. And so the slow erosion creates a very deep soil, very, you know, well-drained soils as well. But also as these soils are developed, it's pulling away a lot of that tilth from, you know, again, like the Clements area where you don't have a lot of that. The tilth is slowly moves down into the lower regions. So that you have, again, those different layers of soil types. So the alluvial soil is has both the organic material, but it also has a really well-drained kind of almost sandy loam. Yeah. And that's what makes Lodi very unique. That's why, you know, back in the day, we were planting watermelons and by just putting a seed in the ground, that's pretty amazing.
Well, it has really extraordinary drainage, and one of the key quality tools that we have in really continuing to nurture and develop our vineyards, not only in their health and well-being, but in the development of high quality fruit, is our ability to regulate and monitor the amount of water that our vine has access to. And so being in these highly, you know, alluvial soils that have really good drainage allows us to really use that that irrigation technique in a way that benefits our ability to concentrate the flavors of the fruit as they are grown. And that's what helps contribute to the wine quality that we're able to provide. If you were here in the tasting room, we literally have soil samples of every single vineyard from which we're producing a single vineyard wine. And it looks like a Crayola crayon box exercise in different shades of browns. They are all different, and that nothing drives home the story as just that visual representation. And I bring them to you, but I don't think it'll convert over video.
All right, well, I'm officially telling everyone who's watching to come out to San Francisco in late January to the Zinfandel experience. I'm going to go a couple days early, and I'm going to go out to LangeTwins and finally visit this magical place that Randy started telling me about 5 years ago. But let's jump into the wines. But before we do, David, I have a question for you, and this is tough because you've not been prepared for this, but you know, I know you have an amazing culinary background as well. What's your favorite wine and food pairing for the holidays?
Oh my gosh.
He's not limited to just one, right?
Okay, give us your top three.
Top three. You know, for the types of wines that I like to make, they're always very kind of broad ranging. They have a fruit element to it, but it's always incorporated with a little bit more of these kind of earthier qualities. And so for me, I particularly like recipes that are driven by truffles, especially during this time of year. I love using truffles or truffle oils on some of the dishes and how it incorporates just those strong aromatic qualities with wines. That to me is fascinating in itself. And so, so any of those kind of truffly kind of
culinary meals.
Culinary,
yeah. So what wines do you pair with that?
Yeah, what are you pairing there?
So, well, we're gonna taste one here in a second. That would be the Cabernet. The other one, you know, is probably what we're going to start it with, which is the Chenin Blanc. And so what I like about this wine is it's a bit of a flashback we talked about, I think, before. Chenin Blanc back in the 80s was such a popular, wonderful wine, and it fell out of favor. And I just love that we're resurrecting this.
Me too.
For a lot of reasons. For me as a winemaker, to really create wines that just speak purely of the variety, and this is what the Chenin Blanc is. We don't do a lot to try and manipulate it or try and create different layers and flavors. It's all about how we express the Chenin Blanc and the vineyard it comes from. So what I like about this wine and how I would pair this one is well, if they allow us to, Dungeness crab with this one would go perfect.
Who's hoping the crab season comes back?
So hopefully crab season, they're laying us off right now, and I think it won't be Christmas, but it'll be maybe New Year's. They'll be able to get some Dungeness crabs out.
So David, this is the wine you're talking about. This is the Prince Vineyard Chenin Blanc, which is actually, it's a great segue. This is the first wine in our tasting tonight. I just opened it up right before we started. I love it. And tell us a little bit about sort of the tasting notes and the provenance of this wine.
Well, this is a vineyard that we've worked with for it's like a lot of wines that we make here. We actually work with these wines for a long time, and then we decide this is ready for prime time. This is one that we really want to put into the bottle.
Yep.
And so Prince Vineyard, we've kind of worked with it for a while, and now we've created this Chenin Blanc from the Prince Vineyard. It is in the Clarksburg region. It's an older Chenin Blanc vineyard, and so just like me, the energy level kind of self-regulates. As you get older, there's only certain things that you do, and the rest of it, we're not climbing Mount Everest anytime soon. But the smaller hills we'll be more than happy to climb. And so it regulates itself as far as the energy level, and also consequently the amount of crop that it develops and ripens. I like this vineyard because it has a very consistent ripening curve. It doesn't go too fast, it doesn't go too slow, and consequently you have this really nice development of fruit. You have a really nice natural acid balance, and so we're looking for really the balance between the two main acids in a wine, which is tartaric acid and malic acid. We like that because it adds that freshness. It adds that real kind of the quality of really cleansing the palate, and then also allowing you to really enjoy food, because this is the thing, as you eat, your palate actually gets used to those flavors. And so by having a sip of wine, it actually kind of resets and refreshes your palate, so that when you taste your food again, it tastes as intense and as flavorful as that first bite. And so that's what really I think I love about wines, is it has that ability to really make that entire meal just that wonderful, intense thing, instead of losing those flavors.
You get the benefit of that first taste over and over again. And so with this wine on the vineyard side of the equation, a fun fact with the vineyards, some of our vineyards in Clarksburg are in fact below sea level, because they are in fact on islands that are bolstered up through the levees. And so back to its highly organic soils in that appellation and in that area. And it just creates, as David mentioned, just the crispness and a wine that is really showcasing the fruit from this vineyard itself. And it's worth noting that these wines, as you look at the bottles and as you show the bottle shot, the most prevalent part of our label is really twofold. One is the name of the vineyard itself, because that's the hero. That's what we're looking to do. So in this case, it is the Prince Vineyard on that, because the grapes that are made, the wine that this grape is made from is in fact from this singular unique place that only we can offer you, because it's ours.
Yes, sure.
Secondarily, you notice the graphical elements in the upper left and lower right-hand corners, and that is a digital representation of the soil. So if you were to take all of our single vineyard wines and put them in a row, you would notice the same differentiation that you would see if you put all of the soil types from all of those vineyards as well. So we really are looking to, to deeply represent what this area is. And we're just so fortunate. David is able to not only bring that history of what we've done on the vineyards, but really his art to life here in the glass for us to enjoy.
We love it. It's absolutely delicious. I'm pairing it with a Fontina cheese, and I'm absolutely loving it. We have a couple of questions. Mark was asking, does this white wine go through any secondary fermentation, malolactic fermentation?
Great question. And so, as I mentioned, the two main acids, tartaric acid, malic acid. Malic acid, that would be the secondary fermentation that Mark is speaking of. And that would lower the total acid content of the wine. We also find that tartaric and malic acid present in a very different way on the palate. So tartaric acid is more in the front, so the very beginning of the palate, and malic acid is in the back of the palate.
Mm-hmm.
So what we like, especially in the Chenin Blanc, is that there's a really nice, crisp, clean acid balance to it, meaning that the front of the palate, the tartaric acid, actually meets the malic acid in the back of the palate. And so you get this nice arc of brightness, the acidity. And because of that, it just feels a little bit more kind of harmonious in that sense. Mm-hmm. If it was just tartaric acid in the front, and then we did a secondary fermentation, you get the brightness in the front, and then it finishes flatter. And so we like to be able to really retain the malic acid. We don't do a secondary fermentation, so it's a great question. You'll find a lot of Chardonnays will go through that. Mm-hmm. They'll do that also because it's usually, again, harvested riper, so there's more intense flavors mm-hmm. from the as it's a riper kind of tone in the Chardonnay, and then also the richness of the Chardonnay. It kind of lends itself to having that little bit lower acid. So I like the Chenin Blanc. I love the brightness. I love that beautiful melon citrus fruit quality of it. And I like, for as delicate of a wine it is, it still has that nice linger. It has this really nice presence.
It really does. I'm a big fan. I know that for some people they're not really in vogue of the oaky Chardonnays, the secondary malolactic fermentation. This one, even though it doesn't have it, has a lot of richness.
Yeah.
For a white wine that doesn't go through that process, and it's really, and then you get the acid and the melon and the fruit tones are just great.
Yeah, so basically on my side of it, we bring the Prince Vineyard in, we add and conduct the fermentation, and basically it's our problem not to mess it up. Let's just keep it clean, let's keep it fresh, let's bottle it so we can really, again, create a wine that represents that vineyard, that real sense of place.
Absolutely. And in many ways, we're looking to be polarizing in that context, that this is a wine reflective of that very highly specific sense of place. So it's not going to try and be anything other than exactly what it is. And we're very fortunate on that. It's a bit of a jewel. This one's one of my favorite go-tos, and only rivaled by our Aglianico Rosé, which we are not tasting here tonight, but is the other one that I regularly keep on hand.
Well, I'll be tasting that one there in January.
Outstanding. Very much looking forward to it.
So question from Chai, and a good one. I'm dying to know this because I actually put the bottle back in the fridge, so I don't have it in front of me. What's the alcohol by volume on the Chenin Blanc here?
Oh, so
it's gonna be low, but
no, it's gonna be low, 11 and a half.
11 and a half.
Yeah, so I thought so. It's very easy. It's an easy drinking wine.
Oh, absolutely. This is the other thing too. And so great question in that sense, because we harvest early. We would look for that natural acid content. So it just lends itself to what we're trying to achieve in the finished wine. And we also do a stop ferment. So there's just a little bit of residual sugar in the wine, just to kind of give that little bit of a balancing point. So it's fun that way.
The next virtual tasting, we're going to have to include the Aglianico Rosé. As Susan said, you had me at Aglianico Rosé.
Susan, you and I can enjoy a glass of wine together all night long. I love it.
Indeed.
All right, let's go to wine number 2, near and dear to us in New York, because Cab Franc is the unofficial red wine grape of New York State.
I did not know that.
Yeah, Cab Franc it does really well in the New York climate, especially in the Finger Lakes.
Finger Lakes.
Yeah. And there's some terrific Cab Francs, but I got to tell you, I'm loving this one. It's working in the glass. I've had it open for about 45 minutes, and it's just terrific.
We love making this wine, and kind of a funny thing we really don't consider, but now we're so good at doing genetic testing and looking at lineage and things like that. Cabernet Franc is kind of like the base of Cabernet Sauvignon. Cabernet Sauvignon is actually a cross between Cabernet Franc and Sauvignon Blanc. So a red and a white. So nature actually brought us something that we would never do. And so for me, Cabernet Franc is really kind of this progenitor of all these other wines that we make.
So Cabernet Franc is not a derivative of Cabernet Sauvignon, rather the reverse. Cabernet Sauvignon is a derivative of Cabernet Franc.
Yeah,
True.
Cabernet Franc is the mother of Cabernet Sauvignon.
Yeah.
By the way, I love this. It's medium bodied. But it's got a lot of like really nice fruit, and I'm pairing it with a double cream brie, and it's just terrific.
We're gonna have.
Here I sit before dinner.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, guys.
On the wrong side of the camera.
Yeah, you're here to that.
But Cabernet Franc is one of those real winemaker wines in that sense, right? And what I love about it is, you're not really looking at it in the sense of, trying to get a deep fruity wine. You're trying to get a wine that has complexity to it. So it's something that it's like reading a dense book that you got to go back at it and read it again and think about it, read it again, and so it's always telling a little bit of a different story every time. And so the wine is complex in that nature. It's deep. It takes a lot of really kind of thought to understand the wine. And so every time you dive into it, you smell, and I get a little bit of the green olive, black olive. I get the earthiness to it. I get some spice qualities, a little bit of chocolate.
A little bit of leather too.
Yeah, and so these are Ferrari leather.
Yeah, there you go.
Exactly. It's got red fruit Ferrari leather, and it is super complex.
And what I really appreciate about our Cabernet Franc in particular is there are other Cabernet Francs that you may likely have tasted that come out so heavy hitting with the bell pepper component.
Yeah.
And that the fruit is just so flat. And what I really appreciate within ours is the fruit is as much an integral part as all of those other complex flavors, that it is creating something even more. And so it sits so well at the table, in part in pairing, as David mentioned, with all of those beautiful truffle oriented and inspired meals. And I like that there is a fruit element into this wine in particular.
Indeed.
Yeah, no, that's the difference. For anybody who's watching, who's very familiar with the New York State, very good Cabernet Francs that are out there.
Awesome.
This
Indeed.
California Cabernet Franc really brings a fruit element, and you taste it right away. It's just, you would, in a blind tasting, this would be an easy one. Okay, this is from California.
Well, it's sunshine in the glass, we do. We do like that.
And I see this wine like I'm mad about pairing, so I see this wine as just great with that sort of middle section of the meal, or even a cheese course or charcuterie, like tapas, the lighter things as you're getting going. It really goes nicely with that type of food. Without
a doubt, very convivial.
Yeah.
And adaptive.
Very, very convivial.
Yeah, indeed.
But sophisticated.
It is. It can.
Without bragging.
Exactly.
Without.
So, all right. So let's move on to wine number 3, which is a Barbera.
Yes.
And tell us what's the provenance here? I mean, this is an Italian grape, yeah?
It is. And so we actually have planted a fair number of Italian grapes, as that is one of our muses, not only on the viticultural side, but certainly inspired by and encouraged from David and in his creative expression. And so very happily, and I'm nothing but grateful, is while Barbera and Sangiovese are the two Italian varietal wines that we planted in our region, really in pursuit of exploring that Cali-Tal space. But in the last 10 years, we have planted Montepulciano, Aglianico, Nero de Avola, and those are just extraordinary wines because back to our growing soils and our climate are really, really similar to that Mediterranean lifestyle, right? And so the Barbera is a fantastic example, and this is the first vintage Barbera that we produced under this label. And I love it when my wines find me, you know, gravitating to the new kid in town. And this is one of my go-to reds.
Well, good, because for us, again, back to that kind of versatility with food, Barbera has just that beautiful broad range. You know, you're just thinking of yourself at that Italian restaurant, looking at the menu and going, oh man, I got to have that.
Getting hungry while we taste.
And so, you know, it's more of like back to a middle ground as far as the palate is, the extraction, but it also has that really beautiful acid that goes with the wines.
Yeah, I mean, this is a lovely, you know, medium-bodied wine that's got really nice finesse, and we were just in was just in Piedmont in northern Italy, and we were enjoying some wonderful Barolos, Barberas, Barbarescos. And you know, it's just wonderful that you guys are bringing those grapes into your region. We see a little bit of that with some of the producers out east as well, and we really applaud it, especially because there's so many great grapes in other parts of the world. And I always remind people, you know, there's just about 5,000 wine grapes in the world, and we Americans, including me, are very boring, and we drink the same 4 all the time. And so get out of your comfort zone and have a Barbera, you know.
Yes.
Amen to that.
Yeah, without a doubt. And back to that heritage of Lodi, right? So, I mean, when it was nothing but flame tokais, and then it was flame tokais with Zinfandel. And when my dad and my uncle started their partnership in the early 80s, it was 4 varietals that they planted or that they were farming, 3 of them that are obsolete at this point. But it was an exploration over the course of the last 45 years of pushing that envelope, pushing beyond those 4 varietals. But back in the early 80s, those 4 varietals were new here too, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you're at the forefront of planting Cabernet for the very first time. And have you heard about Merlot? And you cannot grow those grapes the same way. They are very different.
Listen, I totally agree. We had Violet Gergich on last week.
Oh,
and she
fun.
was talking about her dad, Mike, who was behind the win at the Judgment of Paris in 1976.
Yes.
It's before that, I guess they were taking Thompson seedless grapes and making wine in California.
Oh, fun travel story. I was a couple years ago, had the pleasure of going to Croatia, and had the pleasure of drinking Gergich wines in Croatia, varietals I had never heard of.
Wow.
And so I would love to connect with her and just swap stories, because they were extraordinary. They're not here, and I wish they were. They were delicious.
Yeah, no, it's quite, if you know the story, which you probably do, it's an incredible story. But the idea that this immigrant who came with $30 sewn into his shoe was the force behind winning that wine
Judgment in Paris,
the Chardonnay is quite a story. Nancy has proposed, and thank you, Nancy, for this, a great pairing. Fra Diavolo sounds like it would be nice with this Barbera.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, we're just gonna go with yeah. Absolutely. I mean, this, as you've noticed as you're tasting through our wines, and you've heard David mention it several times, food is a pretty core part of our ethos. We really like to eat, and we really like good food, and we like adventurous chefs. And so these wines are very much wines that can be enjoyed in this fashion, and are even better enjoyed how you're doing it, Sam, with cheese, with food. And that is truly what our aim is as we're crafting the wine, is sitting at that table and letting the candles burn low.
Without a doubt, it's funny how we really think of how wines fit in our lives. And really, the way I was always raised as a winemaker is we always try and make wines that will grace the table, and not be the ones that overwhelm a meal, but one that works graciously, that supports the food that you make, and really to, again, create the conviviality of the moment. And that's where I think the social bonds really are important in that respect. Is that pairing of wine, food, and friends is unbeatable.
Well, you guys, you're doing God's part of the work by connecting people to the land through the wine, and then we get the food, and then we get the conviviality, and then we're off to the races.
Indeed.
Yeah, it absolutely beats like manufacturing toothpaste caps, right? I mean, it's like business.
I would agree. All right, so we're rounding the corner here and heading home. We have the last wine is the Petite Syrah.
Look at that color.
And look at this color. This is from the Diablo Vineyard. And I tasted this, and I think the Diablo is behind this wine because it's so damn good.
It's devilishly good.
It is devilishly good. Thank you, Marissa.
Without a doubt. And this is a wine that will don't drop it on your white tablecloth or your white carpet. It is a wine, and this is always my go-to example when folks say, talk to us about your winemaking philosophy and so forth. And I want to show this wine and say, that is the function of the very best wine growing and winemaker tool available. And that is,
I mean, this wine, Marissa, is why I got into the wine industry.
awesome. Yeah.
15 years ago, somebody gave me a bottle of Turley Zinn.
Yep.
It was inky black.
Yep.
My wife happened to be making this incredible spaghetti and meatballs, and I was like, I got to learn more about this.
Yeah.
It was so
But
good.
it's really the patience to allow the grapes to do their magic, right? And so it's this color is all natural extraction through extended maceration. It's patience, right? It's patience in the vineyard. It's patience in the winery. When they're this time of year, when the Petite Syrah comes in, we are tight on tanks. And David is a master in saying, no, you let that one sit. That one needs a little more time. And the result is the Diablo Petite Syrah.
And I would also like to give a shout out to the other winemaker here, Karen Birmingham, who is so passionate about Petite Syrah.
She is very much.
Oh
so.
my gosh. And so laser focused on it for a lot of reasons too, is this wine in particular, it can also over extract, and it can become just this big, tough,
Unwieldy.
burly, unwieldy, unyielding wine. And so what I like is how she's watching it, really monitors, again, the extraction levels, the temperatures, which also relate back to extraction, and really trying to create a wine that ages gracefully, that has structure, has depth, but it doesn't have, it has great drinkability early.
Yes.
And that is actually a pretty neat trick to do.
Yeah.
Because I've made some pretty tough, burly Petite Syrahs in my life, and
so this has
Karen is making a singular, beautiful Petite Syrah, and so hats off to her.
a bit of a woman's touch.
Indeed.
But no, it is just, as David mentioned, a wine that comes out the gate with such strength, but such elegance and such softness that it's one that we really enjoy. I'm so grateful, Sam, that you included it in the tasting today, because it's such, as we started with the light crispness of the Shenan and really run through the entire trajectory into something that's inky and rich and deep and as approachable and as pairable with your food and cheeses. So what are you having with this one, Sam?
I am having an aged cheddar. And if I weren't having an aged cheddar, I'd be having an aged T-bone steak.
Yes.
And if I weren't having an aged T-bone steak, I'd be having an aged wood-fired pizza.
Okay. I'm hearing the aged as the theme through all of that, and I'm loving every moment of it.
I mean, it's just I just want to get inside the glass. It's just absolutely enchanting, this wine.
Thank you.
And so balanced. these Petite Syrahs, I mean, they're like a Mack truck. If you don't, and David can attest to this as a winemaker, you can make a Petite Syrah that's it's big and it's bold and it has a lot of good qualities, but it's just hitting you over the head. And this one's got all of the power, but it's got the finesse and the elegance.
Thank you.
Without a doubt.
Well said. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because we want you to enjoy more than your first glass, right? Meaning have the opportunity to say, yeah, I think that will continue through my evening, and not have to your point, bowl you over.
We don't want to, indeed, we don't want to make these fatiguing wines.
No.
They win awards, I will tell you that. Those wines that are just over the top. It's almost like when you buy like a stereo system and it's just loud and beautiful and you want to hear it at really high volumes, but after a while you just want to turn it down, want to listen to something softer, and really go through the evening that way. And so importantly for all these wines that we tasted tonight, and hopefully your viewers and subscribers, they can come here and really experience these wines, simply because we tasted through 4 wines. Know that each of them are expressive of the vineyards. They are unique wines. They are wines that really represent the best of the varieties that we try and make here.
And there is an entire wall of wines to share. So we are so grateful to have been able to share a few of them. But it is the tip.
Absolutely. Well, I love this comment from he just asked a question about the Diablo Petite Syrah. Is it Mike Tyson in velvet gloves? I think yes. I say that yes because I'm a fan of Mike Tyson and the elegance and the power of Mike Tyson. But yes,
I've got some new tasting notes tonight. I've got Ferrari leather. And I've got Mike Tyson in velvet gloves. This is helpful. Keep it coming, guys. But very apt. I think that is,
This one is, man, like this, by the way, and I don't know if this was architected this way by Brianne or your team, Marissa, but this collection of 4 is a perfect Christmas wine pack. You start with a Chenin Blanc. You head into the Cab Franc and then Barbera and then this Petite Syrah. You've got the complete meal covered.
You do, and a wine for every family member. And the wines are as diverse and unique as the family members around your Christmas table. But thank you. Yes, very much so. It is, that's part of the fun.
And let's see, we have a couple of other notes here. Let's see, highly recommend. Well, Susan's a wine club member, so she's absolutely, a disciple and a recommender here. And Nancy, yes, we do need to plan a trip to LangeTwins. I'm going in January, so Nancy, if you want to come with me, you're here on Long Island, so we'll go to MacArthur Airport. We'll get on JetBlue or Southwest, and we'll head out there.
We would love to host you, so by all means, please give us a call.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Marissa and David, for joining us. It's great having you guys.
An absolute pleasure, guys. Cheers. Happy holidays and Happy New Year.
Yeah. Happy holidays and Happy New Year to everyone. Thank you, everyone, for logging in and joining. By the way, next Tuesday, the 21st, join us. We've got 5 winemakers, count them, on this broadcast doing a New York wines holiday guide of wines from New York State and some of the award-winning producers. So it'll be really fun. It's on the website. We'll see you guys soon. Everybody be safe and enjoy some good wine tonight.
Outstanding. Take care.
All right, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye now.